What is up, Steeler fans? Welcome back to another episode of State of the Steelers. I'm your host, and we finally got some quarterback news. We've been waiting on this one for a minute. It's not necessarily the Pittsburgh Steelers signing a quarterback, but it is a quarterback that was most recently with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's Russell Wilson. He was a guy that I think a lot of people still had the door open for, including some in Pittsburgh, to be a quarterback to return to the black and gold. And that's not going to be the case. He has now signed a one-year contract with the New York Giants worth $21 million, $10.5 million guaranteed. That kind of tells you a little bit about where his market was. Making $21 million a year. That's a little bit more than what the Steelers were willing to offer or pay for Justin Fields. I'm not necessarily certain that the Steelers were willing to pay more for Russell Wilson than they were willing to pay for Justin. Justin was at $15 million a year. And in reality, he only had a one-year contract. I mean, let's break it down. It was supposedly a 2-year, $30 million, $15 million guarantee. So 1 year, $15 million. This one, it's only $10.5 million guaranteed, but I'm sure there's some some things that he could do that can increase that cost. I mean, obviously, we can see that it's worth up to $21 million, but I'm sure that $21 million to get to that point probably it would have to be a result of a Super Bowl or MVP type season. So I highly doubt he's going to be able to get the full $21 million, but he does get a potential up to $21 million, $10.5 million guarantee. So I guess when you look at it, when it comes to the guarantees, it is less than Justin Fields. I think that the Steelers, because of the I just don't think they wanted him. At the end of the day, I think they saw what he had. They saw what they were able to do, and I think they saw their ceiling, with Russell Wilson. Plus, there was the added issues going back and forth between himself and Arthur Smith that had been reported, basically saying that they didn't get along, that they bumped heads. And, at the end of the season there, the offense sputtered. And there were some games there in the middle there or in the beginning when Russell Wilson took over that looked fairly impressive. But by the end of the season, that was no longer the case. So what does this mean for the Pittsburgh Steelers? I honestly think that they weren't ever really into Russell Wilson after the season end. I think they knew they were going to move on from him. I think he was probably the last quarterback that they were going to be bringing in and as a fill-in for next year's draft. I still think that the goal is for next year, and I think that the goal for this year is a guy like Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has nowhere else to go, and the Pittsburgh Steelers only have him, maybe a short list of quarterbacks that are available, like Joe Flacco, etc. And I think when you look at what's available out there today and what honestly has been available for the last few weeks, I think Aaron Rodgers, if you're wanting to win a Super Bowl, is probably your best bet. I've been looking at some film from last season, and I do see an increased not necessarily an ability, but I would say mobility for sure. Down the stretch a little bit. I mean, he was able to get out of the pocket. He was able to protect himself within the Jets offensive line. And, I saw a guy that could still throw the ball and still make some pretty amazing throws down the stretch. And I did see his game progress and in a better fashion. And, he's coming off of the Achilles tendon rupture, which I can tell you because I've had that injury myself. It is a lengthy one to overcome, and it doesn't get easier with age. So I am not surprised that towards the end of the season last year that Aaron Rodgers became more comfortable and probably played a little bit better than he did early on. However, I will say that even in the game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, that Aaron Rodgers, I mean, he was out there slinging it. He ended up throwing 2 interceptions to Beanie Bishop, and the game kind of got out of control at the end. But for the most part, throughout that entire game, it was a very competitive game. I was very nervous throughout that game because it started off with Aaron Rodgers to Devontae Adams down the field, and they scored a touchdown right away, and then they opened up the second half, scoring another touchdown, and it was very close. It was a very close game until the end, and I just. With what's out there and what's the plan, right? What's the plan for the Pittsburgh Steelers? I think they're eyeing next year's draft to pick up a quarterback. That doesn't say that they're not going to pick up one this year, but if they go out there and sign an Aaron Rodgers, I think that that lays off the pressure of going out there and drafting a quarterback in the first round. I think that can allow you to, sit back, wait until the fourth, fifth round, see if somebody falls that you are comfortable in trying to take a flyer on, see if they can develop into something, but really still have that eye on the future, eye on that target, whoever it may be in next year's draft. When the draft is in Pittsburgh, I think that it would be nothing much more fitting than to have a first round quarterback drafted in the city of Pittsburgh, and have that person come up, take the jersey, the whole 9 yards. It's something I think that has been in the vision of the Pittsburgh Steelers for some time now. Now, I don't think that they would trump that over finding an excellent quarterback, had there been one in this draft that fell, or in last year's draft that fell, or anything like that. I think that they weren't going to put themselves in a position to reach or to potentially give up the farm, or the future per se, just to go get a quarterback now without the right pieces around said quarterback. And I think when you look at what the Pittsburgh Steelers have been able to do with this team, and the players that they've put around this team, you have DK Metcalf on one side, George Pickens is going to be on the other side. I strongly suspect that to be the case. DK Metcalf wearing number 4 is a big indication of that, and him saying that George Pickens is a staple point in Pittsburgh and has a legacy that he is growing there with the number 14, kind of is an indication that that's going to be the game plan for both of them. And if you look back at what the Pittsburgh Steelers were trying to do with the wide receiver position this past season, that's exactly what they were going for. With when they were trying to acquire a Brandon Ayuk or Cooper Kupp or whoever, the goal wasn't to get rid of George Pickens and bring in said wide receiver. It was to bring in said wide receiver and add them to George Pickens' game and to improve the wide receiver room. So I strongly suspect that that's going to be the case here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You're going to have 2 stout wide receivers on the outside. The slot is going to be run probably primarily by one of those guys when the other one is running the X. Um, I think that both of those guys, whether it's DK or George Pickens, would be an excellent slot guy. But when they're not there, there's a draft pick that the Pittsburgh Steelers have not even used yet in Roman Wilson. And, I think he's a little bit bigger than Calvin Austin, not as fast, but very fast. I mean, Calvin Austin's like a low 4.3 guy. I believe Roman Wilson was a high 4.3 guy or a low 4.4 guy, somewhere around there. So, I mean, blazing speed regardless, but he's a little bit bigger, not the biggest, but a little bit bigger than Calvin Austin. But even at that, Calvin Austin, I think, is going to have his touches and his plays out there on the outside as well. You power that speed with a bunch of I was going to say with the height, but those tall guys have some speed with them too as well. So I really like what the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing there. Then you have the tight end position where you have Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington. They just got, what's his name, Donald Farm. So you have a basketball team here of pass catchers when you look at the receiving units and at the tight ends. The biggest question mark right now is going to be the running back position. I know Jaylen Warren is sitting at RB1 right now with Najee Harris going out to the West Coast. And I think he can handle the load. I think he can be that bell cow, but I don't think that's the goal. I don't think that's the plan. I think the plan is that they're going to draft a running back in the draft. Now, I know I'm hoping it's Genty out of Boise State. I know a lot of people are. There's some other guys in the draft that are fairly quick and still explosive. I think they're going to try to find somebody that has that home run ability, somebody that has that explosion in speed. Najee Harris was lacking in that department when it comes to the speed and able to and burst and get out of situations. He'd get hit and then the pile would commence and he would have a hard time once hit to regain speed to get out of tricky situations. Unlike Jaylen Warren, who would get hit, bounce, and almost lose hardly any speed and still continue to move forward, which was why I think he's had so much success in this league. Just low gravity and low center of gravity, and his ability to bounce and to continue momentum moving forward, I think, is what has made him an excellent running back in this league. His shiftiness and his vision is also a key component to that as well. But you add somebody to Jaylen Warren, I'm not necessarily certain you have just Jaylen Warren. And if you can add another dynamic piece there in the running back group, I mean, this is an offense that can go places as long as the offensive line can hold up, which I strongly suspect that they're going to have a huge movement forward. I mean, I think Broderick Jones is going to have a huge year this year. He's going back to the left side where he's most comfortable with. You know, Fautanu, another rookie who had hardly any playing time last year. I think the Steelers only saw him in 1 year. He's going to be backing on the right side. And Zach Frazier, who had an excellent year last year, will be in for his second year. You know, not last year, but the year before, the offensive line really came together towards the end and down the line. And I think that this year can be the same. I can see it actually starting off a lot sooner, given the fact that most of these pieces are already on the team. And, you know, the only question mark on the offensive line is, are the Steelers going to go with Mason McCormick? Are they going to bring in somebody else? Are they going to draft somebody to fill that position or create some sort of competition? I do strongly feel that there is going to be some sort of competition. I'm not necessarily certain it's going to be a competition that's going to be like in the form of a high paying free agent or a high draft pick. And so it's probably going to be Mason McCormick's job to lose. But this is his opportunity to have a huge second year. The rookie wall is real. And last season, he had not only himself being in that rookie wall, but Zach Frazier next to him was also a rookie. And, you know, Broderick Jones on the other side of him in a position that he was not playing very well last year. I think all may have hindered his performance. So I'm really thinking that now with Fautanu there next to him and another year under Zach Frazier's belt, and perhaps maybe even a full offseason with him as the guy and getting really trained up and focused in with an offseason of a full offseason of an NFL training that'll induce a better performance out of McCormick, especially in the passing game. I think his run game blocking is excellent. He's a very aggressive player. You know, on the other side with Isaac Seumalo, he had that pec injury early on. You know, he came back, but he really wasn't the same that he has been. So I'm really hoping that a lot of his down play or downgrade in play that he had last season had to do with the pec injury. If that ends up being the case and he can be what he was the year before, you know, have a Cam Hayward type of redemption year of last year for Isaac Seumalo, then this offensive line is going to go somewhere. And now, you know, you tie in an Aaron Rodgers who maybe perhaps obviously isn't the guy he was, but at 41, you know, is basically having a head or a offensive coach out there, you know, in the field at the same time as your quarterback. And if the Steelers can protect him with the weapons that they have surrounded him, yeah, this team can be very, very dangerous. It's going to determine up to the defense. Now, the defense, you know, they're great. I think they're great. I think they're going to do really, really good. I know last year at the end of the year they really, really suffered, but a lot of that I think had to do with fatigue and injury due to the fact that the offense was anemic at best. I mean, they were 3-and-out city over and over again. You know, constantly having the defense on the field, and it's not just last year; it's been multiple years. You know, that type of play and wear does take a toll, and so I think that if the offense can do their part, especially early on in the season, and keep the defense fresh, I think we're going to see a much more improved and better team overall. You know, 10-7. I think that's what they went last year. You know, with Aaron Rodgers, I can see 12-5. You know, this schedule isn't as daunting as last season's either. As far as the opponents, we don't know when they're going to be playing those players. As soon as that schedule drops, we'll be going into it and looking at that. So make sure you like and subscribe and ring the notification bell so that way you're notified when the you know, our videos drops. We'll be talking about that. That's going to be in some time, I believe. I think before the draft, maybe it's right after the draft, one of the two. But we're going to keep talking about more and more about this team and where they're going. You know, I think that Russell Wilson, just to kind of put a bow on this, Russell Wilson signing with the Giants is just another indication that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to sign Aaron Rodgers, which has been something that I have been saying this entire time. I got some videos. You can go check them out. It's always, I think it started off with, it's always been Aaron Rodgers. You know, they had the opportunity to sign Justin Fields. They didn't. You know, they had the opportunity to sign Russell Wilson for a fairly cheap deal. They didn't do that either. And those were the two guys that Art Rooney and the Pittsburgh Steelers stated that they wanted back. So I strongly suspect it's always been Rodgers. You know, I don't think they want to waive or steer too far away from the fact that they could draft a franchise quarterback in next year's draft in front of the fans. Well, that's all I got for you guys today. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell. Also, it's very important to like, because I also run another channel called the Drunk Turkey Show, or the DT Show, for those that aren't aware. If you're into like true crime or conspiracies and things of that nature, go check it out. And one thing that I've noticed is some folks will tell me, hey, I never got notified of the live, or I didn't get notified of the show until much later. And my response has always been, hit the like button, hit the like button. The reason why is because hitting the like button, even if you have the notification button ring, hitting the like button tells the YouTube that you want more of this content. So if you want to hear more of my opinion, I am part of Steel Curtain Network, which is of FFSN, Fans First Sports Network. I do cover the Steelers through them on Steel Curtain Network's YouTube channel side, and also on the steelcurtainnetwork.com website on their audio only platform. So if you want to hear more of my opinion on Saturdays, you can check that out there on an audio only platform. But without further ado, guys, that's all I got for you. Until next time, let's go Steelers. Peace.